was sitting there, staring down at the table. His hands were cuffed, and a bit of blood dripped from a cut on his temple. His name, Lucas NOIR, the oldest son of the family. Aggressive, schizophrenic, delusional, and very deadly. He was picked up outside of a friend's house the night before, covered in blood. Thankfully, he surrendered peacefully. I made my way into the interrogation room, stood there a minute to look him over, then took a seat into the chair opposite of him. He didn't look up. Instead, he gently placed his hands down on the table and began fidgeting with his thumbs. I dropped his file down on the table. It landed with a loud thump. Lucas NOIR, born April 17th, 1991. I've been reading about you all night. He raised his head a little, but not enough to meet my gaze. Age 8. You were admitted to a mental care facility after killing your cat. You claimed she was screaming at you, threatening to hurt you. You were released 3 months later. He remained motionless. Age 16. You were arrested for killing a high-class drug dealer, Marcus Hayes. You were found not guilty, claiming it was self-defense. He didn't say a word. Lucas, why don't you tell me what happened last night? Tell me what you did to the Walker family. After a moment, he took a slow, deep breath, exhaled, and finally spoke to me.
I got to Sean's house last night at about 8. Him and I had been fighting over the last few days over a girl. I went over there with the intention of roughing him up a bit, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. Earlier in the day, before my father joined my mother at the farm, he told me that I was a man, and that I should take care of the problem as men do.
What does that mean, Lucas?
My father always says, if someone stands in the way of something you want, you simply slip a knife between their ribs, step over them, and continue onward. So that's what I did, more or less. When Sean's parents left to do some shopping, I smashed a vase over his head, dragged him into the downstairs garage, and killed him.
Tell me how.
You know how.
Backslamming his fists on the cold metal table. I need to hear you say it. Lucas took another deep breath, then continued.
There was an old snowmobile in his basement. After dragging him downstairs, I laid him on the floor, grabbed a nearby jack, raised it up, slid him under, and lowered it onto his head. The weight of the vehicle crushed his skull, but I was still filled with rage. The key was in the ignition, so I hopped on, started it, and cranked the throttle. As the tread spewed his blood across the wall behind me, I finally felt good. I felt that my father would be proud of me.
I took a moment before saying anything to him. I had seen the crime scene, but the way his eyes lit up while talking about it was gut-wrenching. He seemed so proud of the horrible thing he had done. It was as if he had hit a home run at the baseball game and was proudly telling everyone of his achievement. What happened next, Lucas?
His parents came home.
Lucas looked to the one-way mirror behind me, then back to me. A smile stretched across his face.
I knew that they would find Reed dead in the basement, call the police, and that I'd never see my family again. So I killed them too.
How did you do it?
I walked up to the top of the stairs, holding onto the door handle tight. I heard Sean's father call for him. Then, the sound of him running upstairs. I heard his mother move to the base of the staircase and call to him. Jim, maybe he's downstairs. Want me to check? Sean's father came back down and said, no, I'll grab him. You can start dinner. I heard his mother walk into the kitchen. Sean's father came towards the basement door. When he tried to open it, I held on tight, trying to make him believe it was locked.
He stopped talking. His gaze drifted down to the table, a smile still on his face. I think he was savoring the memory of the kill. Go on, Lucas.
I swung the door open. He continued, smacking him in the face with it. I ran past him into the kitchen, shoved Sean's mother to the ground, grabbed a large knife from one of the drawers, and went back to Mr. Walker. He was leaning against the wall next to the door, his nose bleeding. He looked up to me, horrified. Lucas, what are you doing? Where's Sean? I didn't answer him. Instead, I started stabbing him in the chest. Mrs. Walker ran in, grabbed me, desperately trying to pull me away from her husband. I turned and slashed her, catching her on the arm. She fell back and I continued to drive the knife into Mr. Walker repeatedly. I didn't much care for how he was looking at me at this point, so I dug the knife into his eyes as well.
What did you do to Mrs. Walker?
I stood up and turned to her. She backed up towards the wall behind her. She was screaming. It was so loud, I wanted her to stop, but not before making her suffer for trying to interrupt my kill. I drove the blade down through her leg. She screamed again. I began beating her, then stabbing her. Like Mr. Walker, I gouged out her eyes too. A matching set.
I slammed my fists onto the table, stood up and yelled, "Tell me what you did next, Lucas. I want you to say it, to remind yourself of what you then decided to do to that poor woman." He was silent for a moment. He looked up to me, still smiling, still so proud of what he had done to the Walkers. Happy that his sick, twisted father would be proud of what he had accomplished. "What did you do to her?" I asked in a calmer voice, looking into his eyes as intensely as I could.
I defiled her.
"Why?" I demanded.
Mother said to always leave the woman happy in the end.
"You did all of this over some girl? A girl you will now never see again. You are going to spend the rest of your life locked up, underground, and alone. Your family won't be able to get you out. Your lawyers won't be able to get you out. What you did was too severe. You know that, right?"
I don't care.
"You don't care? You're a dead man walking."
So? At least I had fun.
He laughed. I turned away, no longer able to look at the sick and twisted, barely adult man that sat across from me. I heard a knock on the glass, looked up and nodded that I understood. Taking my seat again, Lucas looked me in the eye and gave me an insulting wink. "Where's the farm, Lucas?"
Upstate in the forest. I'll lead you to them if you want. Not because I want them caught, but because I know they won't be. They'll kill you and every agent you bring. My father is going to enjoy hanging your delimbed bodies from the trees. And don't worry, my mother will treat you all very well.
"You're sick, you know that. We're going to lock your whole family up. Just you wait and see."
Even if you do manage to lock us all up, Agent Monroe, you'll never find your wife's body. All your effort to catch us will be in vain. I'll let you in on a secret, though. My whole family took turns on her, and my father took a little souvenir.
He let out another laugh, then looked at me with that twisted smile of his.
Her head.
I stood up abruptly, looking down at Lucas. I felt tears begin to form and roll down my cheeks. I turned to the one-way mirror, back to Lucas, and exited the room. Waiting for me in the hallway was my partner, Agent Lasco. I pulled out my phone and called my wife. It went right to voicemail. I called again. Still no answer. I wiped my face with my sleeve and Lasco placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We're sending a team to your house now, just to be sure. If something's happened, we'll find her." "Thank you, Lasco." Lasco removed his hand from my shoulder, and I followed him down the hall into one of the many open offices. I sat down on the table in the center of the room. Lasco went over to the coffee machine and filled a cup. He came over and placed it in front of me, and then sat down in the chair on the other side of the table.
The most important thing you can do right now is keep your head clear. I'll follow your lead no matter how you want to do this, but don't let your emotions drive your actions. What's the play here, Monroe?
I sat quietly for a moment, my hands wrapped around the mug, thoughts racing through my mind. Did they take her? Did they hurt her? Is it possible he just made it up? I closed my eyes and took a deep, calming breath. Lasco's right. I gotta play it smart. If she's in danger, I have to be careful. What do we have so far?
Well,
Lasco began.
We have the oldest son. He knows the location of the farm. According to him, the whole family's there. If your wife is missing, Director Weiss is going to have you removed from the investigation. Whatever your plan is, we have to act now.
I took another moment to think. There wasn't enough time to plan a flash-out attack or even a backup plan if something were to go wrong. All there was time was for orders, quick and concise. I looked up at Lasco. We're gonna take Lucas into our custody. Gather a team of agents, 2 cars worth. We'll keep our comms on a closed circuit. By the time we hit the road, the team sent to my house will know whether or not she was taken. If she's fine, we'll let Director Weiss know what we're doing. We'll be in some shit, but it should go relatively okay. If she's gone, however, Weiss will call and pull me off the case. He'll have no choice but to send backup. He's not going to be able to pull me in the middle of an active pursuit. Lasko looked down at the table, let out a loud sigh, and looked back up at me.
We're going pretty far off the reservation with this one, Monroe.
Whatever we have to do to stop these psychopaths. Lasko went off to gather agents for our assault on the farm. I retrieved Lucas from the investigation room and brought him down to the parking garage, placing him, cuffed, into the back seat. Lasko hopped into the passenger side a few minutes later. Once the other cars pulled up, we rolled out onto the street and headed to the farm. A little over an hour into the drive, I got the well-expected call from Director Weiss. My wife had been taken. I was ordered back to HQ. As he said this, another agent's voice could be heard in the background.
He's taken Lucas and almost a dozen of our agents, sir. They're heading to the farm.
Weiss began screaming at me to turn around, but I hung up on him. Lasko looked at me, worryingly.
You know, Monroe, this better work. I got a pension I'd very much like to see one day.
Another hour passed by.
Pull in here. The dirt road on your left.
Instructed Lucas from the back seat. Slowly, he pulled off the main road and onto a dirt path in the woods. Another few minutes of driving, and we arrived at a large black metal gate.
We walk from here,
Lucas said. I turned around to see him smiling.
I hope Father put up the decorations.
Next to the large gate blocking the road was a smaller gate that was ajar. One by one we went through as we walked down the dirt road. A loud bang sounded off in the distance ahead of us. The agents drew their sidearms, and Lasko gripped the chains of the cuffs behind Lucas's back. We had no idea what to expect. This family had committed unspeakable atrocities. Even knowing this, we were not ready. Off in the distance I saw another gate, wide open across the road. Hanging from the trees on either side were delimbed corpses. All of us but Lucas let out disgusted groans. One still had blood spilling from its wounds. They were stripped nude, heads shaved, and eyes gouged out. Strange symbols were etched into their stomachs. One was a crescent moon. Another was a picture of a ram's head. As we made our way through the second gate, the other agents carefully looking over the hanging corpses, Lucas let out a twisted laugh.
I love when Father decorates. His art is so beautiful.
Lucas spoke softly, mesmerized by the sight of the dangling bodies. A little further up the road, a young girl sat in the dirt, crying with her back to us. She wore a dark red dress that was ripped and muddy. She couldn't have been more than 13 or 14 years old. I noticed that she only had one shoe. I motioned to the agents behind me to ready themselves in case anything was to happen. Slowly, I approached her.
Are you okay?
I asked in as gentle as a tone as possible. She continued to cry. When I was close enough, I knelt beside her. What happened? How did a little girl like you end up all the way out here? She stopped crying. She turned her head, her eyes locking with mine. A smile, similar to Lucas's, stretched across her face. I stood up and backed away, cautiously drawing my firearm from its holster, readying myself. Once I saw her, I recognized her immediately. Her name was Jessica NOIR, the middle child of the family.